In this video, I'm going to show you how to install BlueTex insulation in existing tubular steel metal buildings. First, I'm going to give you an overview, and then we're going to get into some specific details on how to install. Now, this is our most common request we get for advice and help. And honestly, there's really no information out there like this. And there's really no standard way to do it. So this video, I'm going to use both computer graphics and pictures from actual customers who have installed BlueTex over the last couple years, and I want to thank them for sending pictures and video and everything else in order to put this video together. This video may get a little long, so if you look in the timeline below or in the description, you can jump ahead to the different chapters. First of all, BlueTex foam and foil products are designed for what we call either non-conditioned or semi-conditioned buildings. So these are buildings like barns, sheds, airplane hangars, storage facilities, things like that where you're either not heating and cooling them at all, or you might be occasionally running an AC or heat just to take the edge off. But if you're looking for 24/7 comfort like a house, the BlueTex foam and foil products really aren't the right product. We've got some other solutions for combining a radiant barrier with traditional insulation, so you can check that out on the website. When you finish installing BlueTex insulation, your building is going to be significantly cooler in the summer, almost like a tree landed over it. It's going to be warmer in the winter, and you're going to minimize or eliminate moisture and condensation inside the building. When BlueTex insulation is installed in this method, you're going to create a continuous air and vapor barrier that will keep the warm, moist air inside the building from ever getting to the cold metal that causes condensation. Hopefully this video will give you enough information and details for you to tackle this project. Now, if you have any questions about your specific building, we offer great customer service and are always willing to help. Your best bet is to send us an email with pictures telling about your building and the question you have, and we will definitely help you out. So there's two parts to the process. There's the planning part and the doing part. Abe Lincoln famously said, "If you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe." And that's kind of the theme that you need to go into. This is about planning, prepping, and getting it all ready before you actually start to install. With that said, installing BlueTex is pretty straightforward. Basically, you're going to pull it tight and screw it into the metal framing. The biggest challenges are going to be in the corners and at the transition between the end walls or the gable ends and the roof. Also working around things like conduits, lights, and other things that are stuck or attached to the front of the framing. First, let me explain to you why these areas can be tricky, and then I'll cover exactly how to make it work. What you will find is it's pretty easy to run the BlueTex across the walls. Basically just pull it tight and screw into the metal. The challenge is when you get down to the corners. Now, if you bring that BlueTex all the way down on the front of the framing, when you get to the corner, there's no flat surface to attach or screw into. It's basically a corner on a corner. And so this is where you've got to do some prep work. Otherwise, if you try to attach it to the side of the corner piece, it creates a bulge or a bubble and it just looks awkward and sloppy. I'm going to show you a way to make it clean and efficient and go super fast. Before we get to that part, let's talk about some other areas that we need to prepare for. If you want to use pre-painted screws and washers, here's what you need to do. I do this a couple of days ahead of time to let them dry. Pre-assemble the screws and washers, use a screw gun. Now, I would use or wear a glove so the thing doesn't spin and cut your finger. You don't want that to happen. So pre-assemble the screws and washers, stick them in a piece of styrofoam, and then spray a couple of coats of paint on them and let them dry. The next thing you need to decide is how you're going to handle the transition between the side walls and the roof. Now, your building might have corner bracing. These are the little pieces of metal that come down at about a 45-degree angle connecting the wall to the roof. You've got to decide, do I want to run behind the bracing all the way up to the corner and then up to the roof, kind of like in the red line you see here? Or do you want to follow that slope of the 45, kind of like the blue line? Personally, I think the red line method is better. It makes for a cleaner install. You get a nice transition between the roof and the wall. Now let's talk about how we're going to handle attaching the BlueTex in the corners. What you need to do is create what's called a hard corner. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to install a piece of wood on either side of the corner framing. Basically, you can either use a piece of 2x2 wood, you can use a piece of 2x4 that you rip down the middle. chances are you might have some scrap wood laying around that would work fine. There's two types of screws that you can use to attach the wood to the metal. One is called a TEX screw, and one is a standard self-drilling metal screw. Now the TEX screw, the way it works, it has a little wing on it, and as it goes through the wood, it bores through the wood before it drills into the metal. Theoretically, that works fine, but in reality, it actually takes a long time. So I would recommend using the hex head self-drilling screws. And what you want to do is pre-drill all these holes. You want to attach one screw about every 4 or 5 feet, so in a corner, maybe top, center, and bottom. Pre-drill the holes, and then use your hex head screw gun and just push that screw right in and attach to the metal. Next, you're going to do the same thing on the gable ends, where the roof connects into the end wall. And here are some pictures and illustrations to show you how to do that. This is basically kind of like doing drywall. If you've ever done drywall, you need to have a hard corner to attach on both sides. The next step is optional, but I highly recommend it if you want to have a clean, sharp transition from your walls to your roof. And what you want to do is add either a 1x4 or a 1x2 along the top edge of the wall where it meets the roof. This is kind of like doing crown molding in a room. It's just going to go up in the corner. And what this will do is it'll give you a hard surface, so when you make that transition or the turn from the wall to the roof, you'll have a few extra places to screw into. The next tricky area in a lot of metal buildings is where the overhead door sides are. Now, typically you can't screw into the side track of your overhead door, or else the screws will interfere with the door coming up and down. And what you want to do in this area is to take your 2x2 and use some high temperature adhesive or some industrial adhesive and basically stick it to the metal, the exterior metal. Let it dry overnight, and then you can screw into it just like your corners. The next thing you're going to do is mark it up. And this is probably the most critical part to having a successful installation. So what you're going to do is, let's assume you're using the 48-inch material. The first piece is going to go along the ground. So what you want to do is go around the perimeter of the building, use a Sharpie, and at 48 inches from the ground, just put little marks all the way around the building. And then you're going to put some marks in for your second piece. The key is you want to have a 4-inch overlap. So what you're going to do is you're going to go 44 inches up from that first mark, or 92 inches from the ground, and put a second line. Do that all the way around the building. And then you're going to continue to go up your side walls, into the corner, and on the roof, 44 inches at a time until you get all the way to the center ridge. As far as other prep work, you do not want to remove the corner bracing, and I'll explain that here in a minute. Also, if you've got any conduit or light fixtures, things like that you can undo, if possible, you want to run the BlueTex between the conduit and the framing. It just makes it a lot easier to install. You can run it across the front, but a lot of times you get some bulges and wrinkles, and it just looks a little sloppy if you do it that way. So if you've done all this prep work, congratulations. You have sharpened your axe, and you are ready to get started. There's generally two different ways to install the BlueTex insulation. One way is to go corner to corner, and if you're going to do this, I would recommend doing the side walls first and the roof, and then come back later and do the end walls and the gable. The second method is to do kind of the wraparound method, which depending on the size of the building, you could actually go all the way down one wall, make a 90-degree turn and either terminate on a door or another corner, something like that. Either start on one of the side walls, or you can do the wraparound method. And what you want to do is measure the length of the wall or the two walls, roll out the BlueTex on the floor. You're going to have the foil side down, that way you keep your white side clean. And I would roll it out and add about 8 or 10 inches to the length and then cut it off. For the first piece, you want to go ahead and peel off the paper backing on the tab and fold that underneath onto the foil side. It's going to be down on the ground and tucked up behind, so you're never going to see it. Having 3 people is best. You want to have 2 on either end to keep the BlueTex tight, and 1 in the middle to attach the screws and washers. For that first piece, you're going to use the ground and also those 48-inch marks to line your piece up. Pull it tight and start applying screws in the middle and work your way out. What you want to do is put a screw on the very base trim, the base part of the metal, and then also about 8 inches from the top of the BlueTex. So it's about 40 inches from the ground. Now you don't want to put any screws in the bottom 6 or 8 inches of the side framing, because that's usually where the side metal goes into the base and actually has double layers of steel, and it's almost impossible to screw into that section. From here you want to pull the BlueTex tight and attach 2 screws to each frame on the sidewalls. Work your way from the center out to the corners, but don't do the corners yet. When you get to the corners, you should have 4 or 5 inches extra on the end, or enough material to make that turn and go down to the next corner. Now what you want to do is use something like a drywall blade or like a 6-inch putty knife and push the BlueTex back into the corner to get it in there nice and tight. Then attach 2 or 3 screws into the corner wood that you installed earlier. Congratulations, that first piece is done, and as you keep going, they'll get faster and easier. Next, you're going to install the second piece, and you're going to line it up with that second row of Sharpie marks you put at 92 inches. When you do that, the bottom should overlap the first piece by about 4 inches, and that tape tab is going to be at the bottom pointing down. Then what you want to do is start in the center, put that screw about 8 inches from the top edge of the BlueTex. That's your first screw. Then your second screw, you're going to come down, and where the overlap is, that 4-inch section, that's where you're going to apply your second screw. From there, same thing. You're going to work from the center and work down to the corners. If you have corner bracing, you're usually going to reach those within the second or the third piece going horizontal. And here's what you want to do. Take the 2 screws on the bottom of the brace. You want to unscrew those and do not unscrew the top screws. When you undo these, you should be able to pull that brace out 2 or 3 or 4 inches away from the wall, kind of like a hinge. You're going to run your BlueTex behind the corner brace on the wall up to that third Sharpie mark, or the whatever Sharpie mark that you've got, and terminate that top screw up there. Then come down, put in your second screw on your overlap. And then here's the trick. What you're going to do is you're going to push that brace back so it's just barely touching the BlueTex. From there, you'll see where you should cut. Take a utility knife and cut a little 1 or 2 inch slit on either side. Then you can just push that bracing right back in to the slots that you made in the BlueTex. From there, take the screws that you took out, use your screw gun. You should be able to push against the BlueTex just a little bit and use the same holes to get back and attach that. Now, occasionally, if you're using like a 6mm product, the brace may be sticking out a little bit too much that you can't use the same holes. Typically, these are self-drilling screws. You just put a little pressure, screw it in, and make new holes. From here, you want to do the other side and just continue up both the walls, up the roof until you meet in the middle top ridge. Now, you're going to have a little bit of overlap in the center. That's okay. Just overlap it, put a couple extra screws, and then use a piece of white tape to seal that seam. Now it's time to work on the end walls, and you want to do it just like the side walls. Start at the bottom and work your way up. Now, a little different thing, when you get to the corner, you want to pull it tight, attach your screws, and then wrap it around. You should have a couple of inches spare. Then take that blade, either your putty knife or your drywall knife, and stick it behind the BlueTex and use it as a cutting board, and use your utility knife and just cut it about a 1/2 inch from the edge. That way it gives you a nice clean corner. Then you can take the 3-inch white tape, just run that up and down in the corner, and you've got a great looking finished corner. At this point, you just have a couple of details to wrap up. If you haven't already, take the paper backing off all the peel and stick seams and press that tape tab firmly to the layer below it. Now, just FYI, we use an acrylic adhesive on these tape tabs, and it actually takes 3 or 4 days to fully cure or harden. It actually creates a chemical bond to the layer behind it. Finally, if you have any doors or windows, you probably want to put a few extra screws and washers around the perimeter of those, and then trim them clean, and then come back with some 3-inch white tape and just basically wrap from the white side onto the framing to really make those details look nice. Finally, there's one final technique I want to tell you about, and that's called splicing. Eventually, you're going to have a piece that runs out that won't make the full length. In this case, you're going to have to splice them together. And here's all you do. On the frame, put an extra screw, and then just trim the BlueTex even with the frame. Then what you want to do is on your next piece, lay it out on the concrete and use a straight edge to cut it nice and straight. Put it up against the other existing piece, put 2 or 3 screws in it, and then put a piece of white tape to seal that seam, and then continue on. I hope you enjoyed this video and have enough confidence to install BlueTex insulation in your building. And like I said earlier, if you have any questions, give us a call or send us an email with some pictures. We offer the best customer service. Finally, if you've got any pictures or video to share of your application, please send it to us. It's amazing how many different uses and applications people have found for BlueTex insulation. We want to create more content and video for future customers. Thanks for watching.